Hello everyone, so in this video we will be talking about the Walksnail system of cadecs and how you could dive in to this system. It is currently used for FPV Drone to output a 1080p feed directly to their choice of goggles. For this video, we'll just discuss two ways for you to have the goggles feed that Walksnail is infamous about. So, two things. You need to have a VRX or you have a Walksnail Goggles X. Actually, you could also use any Walksnail goggles, such as the Dominator and the Goggles V1. But for this video, let's just talk about the Walksnail Goggles X. So, if you are trying to save up some money before you go and dive into a system, the best option for you would be the VRX. The VRX can actually, this is actually inside. You could actually go and, if you want to save some money, you could actually go directly with Walksnail VRX. In this configuration, you just need to put this on an existing goggles. It's either an analog, an HD0, or any goggles that could accept an HDMI input, because this VRX is actually the bare bones of the Walksnail system. You have your two patch antennas at the front, you have two stubby antennas at the top, and you have some buttons here that I have already discussed in a previous video. But the most important is that HDMI output. So once you plug in a mini HDMI here, you could now connect this to your existing gears. It's either, as I have said, either an analog or an HD0 that could accept that mini HDMI input. So with this, you could get this in a much cheaper package compared with going to a goggles route. But there is some catch. You have to put this on top of your existing goggles. And with that, the weight of your existing goggles will increase because of the weight produced by this VRX. I tried to attach this to the HD0 goggles, but of course, as you go on, the weight is quite taxing on your neck, since, as we all know, the HD0 goggles is quite heavy. So if you will go with the VRX, go with a lighter goggles, probably a Sky Zone or the O series, O4L, O4X, because they are way lighter than the HD0 system. Okay, so if you'll choose this, go with that route. Another thing with the VRX is that it requires a separate battery. So if you'll be doing this, you have to power up your goggles and you have to power up the VRX. So if your battery is just a 2S, just such as mine, it's just I think 3000 milliampere. It's not enough, especially if you want to fly for long periods of time, because really it sucks a lot of power, and it seems like you are using two goggles at that time. So if your goggles is already draining up the battery, this will eat up your battery as well. So if you will use this, try to get a bigger battery, probably a 3S or a 4S with a bigger size. Now, if you will be using this with a power bank, some people did that, and as long as it's a PD charge, it could output the needed requirement of the wattage of this VRX as well as your goggles. It could be done. Another thing that you need to consider if you will use this is that if you'll be outputting a 1080p footage directly to your goggles, the goggles must support that 1080p footage. Although this could output 720p as well. Now, if you are going with the 1080p route and your goggles is not able to distinguish the 1080p footage, you'll just have a blue screen or a blank screen. So try to make sure that if you'll be using this, your goggles could support either 720p or even a 1080p. I tried to use this with a very old box goggles of Sky Zone. I think it's the Cobra X. The Cobra X can accept up to 720p if I'm not mistaken. So I was able to use this, but of course I cannot use, which is the other thing that you need to consider, the high frame rate. Only HD0 is able to accept that high frame rate. I think it's 100 FPS, if I'm not mistaken. If you really need to consider this, I think you have to spend a bit more time researching on what goggles that you may need to put this in. But in case you don't have a goggles, but you really have you only have a budget for this, you could actually plug it in to a monitor using a mini HDMI to an HDMI port, and basically just use your TV as your monitor for your flight. So the cheapest way to go with the Walksnail system, go get the Walksnail VRX. But of course, to have an easier way of dealing with the Walksnail system, it is best if you go the route with using their in-house goggles. You could actually opt for the one. It can accept up to 1080p. Next would be, you could go with the Dominator. The last would be go with Goggles X. Okay, this is the Goggles X, and with this system, it's like a VRX on steroids. So they slap this in and make it optimized so that the feed coming from the VRX going to the screen inside of your goggles will have the minimum amount of latency. When I tried to use this for a couple of days, one thing is I was able to save a little battery because I just need to plug this in. I don't need to have a goggles and a VRX, but of course it comes with the cost. So if you are not invested heavily with Walksnail and you just want to test if it's the right system for you, go with a VRX and use it to your existing gear. But with this one, you save up your battery every time you are flying. This is actually optimized by Walksnail to be compatible with all of the VTXs that they have released already. Also, if you will be comparing it with other goggles from different manufacturer, HD0, DJI, the quality of the screen is quite almost on par with all of this system. Another thing is, this is way lighter than having the VRX and another goggles to be used on your head. So one of my priorities for my neck pain, I think this is a good option for you. It just a touch lighter than the HD0 goggles. And another thing that you might want to consider with the Goggles X than the VRX is that this is Walksnail tried to future-proof this by having a removable module. So if ever they have a new update for the chipset that they use for this module, you just need to buy the module instead of buying a goggles again, which is hello DJI, hello. So with this one, you just need to update the module. You don't need to buy another one. Hello Avata 2 and Avata 1. So that is those are the things that you might want to consider if you're going with the Goggles X. Well, I'm not saying that this is way better in terms of the Walksnail system than the VRX, because actually if you turn this on, the menu system is just really similar with the VRX. So what we're trying to say here is that your user experience is much more optimized by using the Goggles X rather than the VRX. If money is one of your main consideration before you buy a product, the VRX will not disappoint you. This is the cheapest way you could go with the Walksnail system. But in the future, Walksnail will be producing a much more cheaper version of the Goggles X. I think then you could go and buy that cheaper version of the Goggles X. But at the moment, I think the Walksnail VRX is the best option for you if you want to go and start your FPV drone hobby with the Walksnail system. Another thing that you might consider before buying this Goggles X is that when it was released, there are a ton of problems. Since it gained a lot of traction, it went viral. There are a lot of people who bought this when it was launched. So the problem is it is plagued with problems with overheating and the screen having this problem every time it overheats. But according to Cadex, when I asked them just a couple of days ago, they have said that they already fixed the issue with the heat sink Although when I'm trying to fly, I do feel a bit of warmth in this top part of the goggles, up to the point that sometimes it's quite hot. So I'm not sure if that would be detrimental in the future, but I think I'll take what Walksnail have said, that they already fixed the issue. But if it's not acceptable for you, you might want to research about that overheating problems of the goggles X, so that you will have an informed decision. Which of this would you choose? This is just a quick one. I just want to share with you the difference of these two products here that Walksnail has released for the FPV drone pilots. So if you go with this VRX, just try to understand the limitations of this VRX. If you go the route of the goggles X, just try to visualize the problems or some shortcomings of Walksnail when this was released. Although, of course, they already patched those problems. Let's take it as a grain of salt that it's already solved. But at the end of the day, this has a better user experience compared with the VRX. If that is your main priority, you could consider that as a way for you to choose if you will go with the goggles X. Hopefully this video helped you to decide which of this will you go to when you are going with the Walksnail system. And as always, see you in the next one. Happy flying. Take care.